Hello and welcome everybody to Los MMA Hermanos podcast. This week we are doing something a little bit different, not because we want to, but because we ultimately have to. So we did our podcast on Monday like we usually do, but there was a lot of connection issues going on for some reason, as well as the data being transferred, the audio and video files being transferred to my computer. So we can't really find a time this week where we can both be on. So unfortunately, Luis won't be on. Maybe he can do a separate episode and I'll upload that as well. But we did want to give you guys something. So let's just jump into it and kind of talk about what happened this past week, this upcoming week, and then just a little bit extra on the end there. So let's start. This is going to be a little different. I enjoy my partner in crime, my hermano in crime, Luis, with our back and forths and the chemistry we have. But we definitely want to get you guys something. So let's start with Cannonier versus Gastelum card, UFC Fight Night. This is in Vegas, of course. I'm gonna be honest. I'm getting a little tired of Vegas. There's not many fans. It's always these non pay per view events are always in Vegas, and I understand because of COVID that this is kind of the way it needs to be for now. But I hope that they get back out there. From what I hear from the news and kind of the interviews Dana White has talked about, I think they really want to stay at the UFC Apex, which is in Vegas. It's convenient for them. They don't have to, all the cost for going to different cities isn't there. So I think that's just going to ultimately be where they end up going. But onto the actual card, it was a meh card in my mind. Luis would say differently, although he did agree with me throughout that podcast that will not be aired, that there was some stuff that was meh. And so I'll explain. I'll start at the top of the card and work my way down. Jared Cannonier versus Kelvin Gastelum. Now, for those that don't know, Kelvin Gastelum, 2 years ago had one of the greatest fights for interim title of all time against Israel Adesanya. He has been fighting the top tier athletes this whole time. Top five, damn near every time. His resume speaks for himself. I think this was his 20th fight in the UFC. And, that he's only 29 years old. So that's crazy. But he seems like a veteran. He's still pretty young. He still can be in his prime. And unfortunately, he took this loss to Jared Cannonier. But um, you know, uh, again, it was meh. Jared Cannonier, it was expected to win. He was ranked number 3. I believe Kelvin was ranked number 9. Definitely up there. Wasn't really close in terms of the rankings. And, Jared Cannonier winning against Kelvin the way that he did wasn't anything special. I don't think he will get the title shot from this. And he might just because of the fact that Israel Adesanya wants to fight somebody that he hasn't yet. And he is ranked number 3 and he just won. So that's a possibility. But the fight was very competitive. I thought that, if it wasn't for Jared Cannonier just hitting Kelvin Gastelum right on the chin with that, I believe it was just a jab, or a hook perhaps, but he got hit with a nice. I mean, honestly, anyone else probably would have been knocked out, but Kelvin Gastelum fell to the ground and bounced right back up, and I think that gave him that decision. It was really competitive though. But again, it wasn't anything spectacular. It wasn't a, take me to the deep waters kind of fight. The lightweight co-main event was Clay Guida versus Mark Madsen. And again, another meh one. Clay Guida has one of my favorite fights of all time against Diego Sanchez. He's always been a legend. He has done so much. You can find so many highlights of Clay. And he's, even though his record's 36-18, man, he's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. So he came out in this fight really aggressive, like he always is, and moving. He never stops moving. He just continues to kind of sway back and forth, keep the head movement going, and that's really challenging for these competitors. It's also really hard to score. So Mark Madsen, for those of you that don't know, he is undefeated, and coming into this week, he has had a lot happen to him personally with his wife having some surgeries and just some unfortunate events in terms of the family. It was and something that the UFC during the pre-fight post or pre-fight conferences and just him talking through to the media, he was letting them know. So it was kind of a sad story, and really good for him for getting the W. But and I don't think I think he won. I mean, I really do. It's really hard to score a Clay Guida fight for the way that he moves and always kind of keeping the action high, even though he might not be connecting. It's hard for the judges, but I think they did it right. Mark Madsen came around with the W, but because of the way that it's so hard to score, it almost seemed like they gave Mark Madsen that W just because they wanted to keep that undefeated streak alive. He's a silver medalist Olympian in wrestling, I believe Greco-Roman wrestling in the Olympics, and he's expected to do big things. I wasn't impressed. Again, another meh fight. It went to a decision, just like the main event, and yeah. So we'll see what's next. I'm not really going to nitpick here and see what's next for these fighters. For the most part, we'll get to a few that I do want to talk about, but Parker Porter was the next fight, and he went against Chase Sherman. So these guys are heavyweights. They, again, middle of the card. Honestly, don't know why they were there. We'll get to this, but basically, the enter flyweight of the main card should have been the main event, or at least the co-main event. But nevertheless, Parker Porter versus Chase Sherman was another decision. It was a pretty good fight, but in terms of excitement and just showing something that makes them level up and try to put them into the next round of competitive athletes to kind of get up the rankings, you didn't see that there. Trevin Jones versus Sayodokov Kakramanov. Now this was a good one. Okay, so now we're getting into it because now that again, those top three, they're the main event, co-main event, and then the one underneath that, meh. I fell asleep, had to come back the next day and finish it off. Just the main event. I couldn't make it, but the rest of these fights were super interesting, super competitive, a lot of good stuff going on. So let's start with Trevin Jones versus, again, Kakramanov. Trevin Jones, 5-star Trevin Jones is an up-and-coming fighter. They really think that there was something, they saw something in him through his last couple fights. They've really been promoting him more so than, him in the past. And he was scheduled to fight someone else. I can't remember the name quite yet. Maybe it'll come to me. But, the guy, I don't know what happened, maybe COVID or an injury, but unfortunately, the guy had to leave and get out of the fight with Trevin Jones. So they needed a last minute replacement. This was very, very last minute. But this is what made it so exciting. So Kakramanov, not even a UFC fighter, they asked him to come through. I think he was currently or in the Ukraine when they called him, and they had to get him over all in a week span. And so within that week, he ended up flying, having to cut weight, going and quarantining, and just really doing, having no time to get ready for this fight, but being ready, right? And so the opportunity came, and he opened the door and took full advantage of it. He got the submission in round 3 against Trevin Jones, and honestly, all the way up until that third round, he was looking like the fighter that was going to win. Talk about getting that opportunity and now becoming a UFC athlete. There's no way that they're not going to sign him. Trevin Jones is someone that they were trying to promote. They're trying to give him good fights. And this guy came in here and submitted him. So, Kakramanov, congratulations. You deserve it. And I'm excited to see what happens because it was really a dominant showcase. And you look like you deserve another fight with a good competitor. That's for sure. Moving on to the next one, there was Vince Pichel versus Austin Hubbard. This was the only decision of the night that was extremely competitive, really fun to watch, and I enjoyed every second of it. Vince Pichel was just, and when we talk about these UFC fighters getting another fight, usually what I get excited about is like, okay, this fighter won, he leveled up. It's time to give him someone harder, right? Try to get up these rankings and really show that you can become the champion, perhaps, right? One day you want to see these things in these athletes. And Vince Pichel ended up doing just that. He went 3 rounds with Austin Hubbard, and he looked every bit as dominant from the start of the first round to the very end. That was exciting to see. He was really good at his takedown defense. When he did get taken down, he got right back up, and his strikes were very impressive. I don't have again, I'm going to do a short episode here, so I'm not really going to go into the nitty gritty details, but man, he really put on a show. I think what's next for him is to get a top 15 opponent, number 15, 14, within the lightweight division and show that he's capable of being there. Now, I will spend some time on this opening main card fight against Alexander Pantoja versus Brandon Royval, the flyweight division. So last week, or the last time that we did a podcast, Luis and I talked about the flyweight division, and we kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent, which I'm doing again, about how they deserve a lot more press. They deserve a lot more effort from the UFC to make these guys stars and have people interested in them. And my gripe is the fact that this was the opening card, and there was a lot of implications here. Alexander Pantoja was ranked number 3, Brandon Royval number 6. These guys are top tier competitors. Alexander Pantoja is probably going to get the title shot next, potentially. If not next, he'll get it the one after that. Fun fact: Alexander Pantoja beat Brandon Moreno twice already. Once in the Ultimate Fighter, and then once more, I believe, after that. And he's done it in a dominant fashion. I think maybe one went to the decision, but the other one was a submission. So he has his number, and Brandon Moreno is the champion. So Moreno, good luck. I'm going for you. I do think he has leveled up exponentially since Pantoja fought him last, but that's going to be a good one to make. Brandon Royval, he is always excitable. This dude does not stop moving, full of energy. I mean, talk about sprawls on sprawls on sprawls this match. It was amazing to watch. It was nothing but fireworks that whole time. And fortunately, it was excitable all the way to round 2 when he got submitted. But again, that was very disappointing in terms of it should have been the main event. It should have been the co-main event. It should have been one of those two. The fact that it was the opener, I do not understand. The flyweight division is full of stars. It's full of action. It's full of excitement. It's full of everything you need to have a successful division within the UFC. And for some reason, they just decided that they're not going to give them what they deserve. And that's that main card, that co-main, that's what you need. However, they did a good job of showcasing, because Brandon Moreno was in the building and he called them out ever so nicely. And I believe that that's the fight that's going to be next. I won't spend much time on the prelim card. Quick run through. This is called the speed session right here, because I'm about to get through this in about a minute, maybe 2. Let's do this. So at the opener, there was Sasha Palatnikov versus Ramirez Brahmanaj. I probably butchered that one. I know I got Sasha right. But anyways, Ramirez ended up winning submission. Great opener. That was dope. I'm glad that he actually trains out of Dallas, so that's pretty cool. If you guys don't know, I am currently living in Dallas, so it's just cool to see that there is a MMA background here. There's a lot of people who actually train here that I'm coming to find out. Lightweight was next. That was Ignacio Bahamondes versus Roosevelt Roberts. Now, this fight was insane, and I'm so glad Ignacio got the 50K bonus. He knocked out Roosevelt Roberts in the 3rd round, 5 seconds left. These are 3-round events. And so with 5 seconds left, they're going to be done. And it was going to go to a decision. And Ignacio was going to win. Everyone knew that he was dominating that fight. And he still went out there, and he ended up, with 5 seconds left, right? Or 10 seconds left. He was like, I'm not done. I want to get a knockout. So he ended up getting a kick to Roosevelt Roberts' head, and he was out. It was insane. I think it was a heel kick straight to the jaw, and that man was out. And Ignacio Bahamondes is going to be a future star if he can get his competitive, if he just keeps improving, honestly, because that first fight, I've seen him fight twice. I believe this is his 2nd fight in the UFC, and he has really shown that he deserves, to get these good fights, and because he makes them entertaining, and he cuts easy, so there's always a lot of blood. But Ignacio Bahamondes ended up taking the W. That was dope. Moving on, light heavyweight, there was William Knight versus Fabio Charant. Fabio Charant said William Knight was all hype. William Knight went out and knocked him out in the 1st round. He is a monster. I believe this man benched, oh my God, I'm going to butcher this, but I want to say he benched like 280, maybe 300 or something, like 26 times. That is insane. He's nothing but muscle. He's scary looking, I was surprised at his voice when they did the post interview because he definitely had a light voice. But the man is scary as hell, and I would not want to fight him. Women bantamweight, there was B. Malecki versus Josiane Nunes. Nunes, a Brazilian, moving up in weight to take on Malecki, ended up knocking her out in the first round with about 6 seconds left. Honestly, B just could not take care of Nunes' aggressiveness. Nunes came out super aggressive, and that's what she's known for. And B did not have an answer, and she slowed up and got caught. And a nice little hook to the side got her out of there. So congratulations, Nunes. I believe she won a $50K bonus as well. Brian Kelleher called out Sean O'Malley. He won on decision. He wants to fight Sean O'Malley. I think that's a great fight to make. And he really did his thing against Domingo Pilarte. And then moving on to the last fight of the preliminary card, that was Austin Lingo versus Luis Saldana. Luis Saldana really didn't do very well. He looked leagues above Austin Lingo in the first round. Leagues above him. I mean, it was like, okay, this guy's the real deal. Austin Lingo, he's going to be in the back for a while. But he ran out of gas. Luis Saldana ran out of gas. I couldn't believe it. Austin Lingo was next. Next up, second round, he said, you know what? I got plenty of gas in the tank. And he ended up taking it to him for 2 more rounds. Got the W. That's how you do it. Luis Saldana, you train with Henry Cejudo. I think he changed camps, but he definitely trained with Henry Cejudo in his camp moving into this fight. And the fact that his cardio was done in the first round, I can't. I don't understand that. I think cardio might be the easiest thing, especially at the featherweight division, to correct, and you didn't. And I don't understand why. Maybe, genetically he just can't get good cardio, but I don't think that's true. I think he probably doesn't focus too much on it because, and these are, again, these are UFC fighters. They're all pros. But who only lasts 1 round, especially if you're a featherweight. We're not talking about heavyweights here, guys. We're talking about featherweights. And for him to be just gassed, I mean, he wasn't really making any shots or taking shots, or he was trying to go for some grappling to slow down the pace and stuff, and it was already not that fast. So again, Luis Saldana, really good technical striker and really good at figuring out the length between you and your competitor and hitting him with those shots without getting hit. But once that gas runs out, everything goes out the window. That is what happened this past weekend. There was also a Bellator fight. I'm not too familiar with that card in terms of, anything excitable or, up and coming stars. But the main event, Czech Congo, ended up submitting, and I'm going to butcher this name, but, I won't butcher it. But anyways, the important thing here is that Czech Congo is still fighting at 46 years old, and he submitted this man in literally the last second of the fight or the round. And it was a great thing to watch. Czech Congo is old as hell, but he is still going strong. Crazy last minute submission, rear naked choke. Good on him. Get yourself a title. I believe even in UFC and Bellator, he's never held a title. That is insane. I can't believe it. Czech Congo. This is something that we talked about between Luis and I. We talk about all this stuff all the time. Czech Congo was my first Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou is a monster. Everybody is so scared to fight him. He looks scary. He's all muscle, no body fat, heavyweight. How can someone look like that? I mean, you don't want to go in a cage with someone like that. And I remember, people have true fear with Francis Ngannou. And Czech Congo was the first UFC fighter that gave me that fear where it was like, man, this person's scary, really scary. This man is tall, heavyweight, nothing but muscle. And, I hope he gets that title one of these days because Czech Congo's a legend, man. He deserves to be, to have that title based off of the fact that he's 46 years old and he's literally looking at the next fight being a title fight. That's so insane. So that was this past weekend. Looking ahead, we have the Barboza versus Chikadze fight coming up. These are both super, big strikers who love to kick. And this is the main event. Edson Barboza just came off of a great win over Shane Burgos. He is looking to make another run. He has a lot of, I believe Barboza is on a really nice win streak right now. And then Giga Chikadze is also on a nice win streak. these guys, it's going to be a good event. This is something that you guys should definitely tune into. It's this Saturday, August 28th at 9 p.m., another UFC Apex event in Las Vegas. But it's going to be a great main card, or main event, I should say. Now, if you're into the Ultimate Fighter, this will be a great card for you guys to watch. The Ultimate Fighter came back this year, and now we're looking at the middleweight and the bantamweight finales of that show. So the Ultimate Fighter takes, I believe, eight, eight middleweights, eight bantamweights. It changes per season which division, but they take eight of them. They fight against each other, and then there's one winner. They fight, which is happening this Saturday, and then the winner gets a UFC contract. Now, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but Brian Battle versus Gilbert Urbina was supposed to be Brian Battle versus Tresean Gore. Tresean Gore got injured and had to pull out. He looks like the real deal, though, so Dana White even said that he has a shot at the UFC, even though he won't be fighting for that contract. So I guess he saw something in him, which I agree. When I watched the show, I think Ariel Helwani earlier in one of his podcasts, I think it was either on Monday or the one today, said that the diehards watched The Ultimate Fighter. And I hope that's not true, but I felt like, all right, cool. I'm a diehard UFC fan then, because I definitely watched, every week. It comes out on Wednesdays. I watched The Ultimate Fighter. Yeah, it's not necessarily that good in terms of just, the reality TV aspect of it. It's, but the fights were really nice. Brian Battle, he is a really good middleweight. He learned the most. He was picked last for Alexander Volkanovski's team, and he's going to do some really good work. I promise you guys. If he doesn't win this, which I think he will, I believe he's going to get another shot at the UFC, and I think he'll be better. He exponentially learned when others didn't, and to be at the finale when he was the first or the last pick for Volkanovski's team shows that he is just, someone who's tapped, who has a lot of untapped potential, and they're tapping into it now. And so I think he's going to take the W. Gilbert Urbina, he replaces Tresean Gore. He was on the show too. I don't know. I'm not really riding high on Gilbert Urbina. I didn't see enough of him during the show to kind of know. I do know that he had two other brothers in the Ultimate Fighter previous seasons, and he was the only one to win a fight in the Ultimate Fighter. His brothers lost both times without winning while they were on the show. Gilbert Urbina did win, and then he came back and he lost against Tresean Gore. Now, moving on to the bantamweight finale for the Ultimate Fighter, that's Ricky Tercios versus Brady Heistand. Brady Heistand, I did not think he was going to make it, to be honest. I still don't have my confidence in him. He trains with really good people. I believe he trains with Michael Chiesa up there in Utah somewhere. And he's 6-1. He fought his really good friend on the show for the first round, and then the second round, he won. I was surprised that he did on that one. He ended up submitting somebody. Ricky Tercios is full of energy, a lot of excitement. It's going to be a fun fight, just the fact that he's in there, because he does not slow down. So I got Ricky winning. I think he's pretty technical too, even though he is fast paced and doesn't stop moving. He fights like he's a flyweight, but he's 11-2. He trains with some good people too, and I got Ricky Tercios winning this. Brady, if you win, I will be surprised, and I'll give you the credits that you deserve, because I have been thinking in my mind that you're going to keep losing every time I see you go into that arena, just based off of what I saw with your training and stuff. But you keep proving me wrong, and that's cool, man. High waters. What do they say? High waters raise all ships. So good on you. Kevin Lee versus Daniel Rodriguez. D-Rod. Kevin Lee, welterweight. He's moving up for the first time. Last time he fought was right before the pandemic hit against the champion of the lightweight division, which is Charles Oliveira, Du Bronx. And so that was the last time he fought. Now he's moving up in weight, rightfully so. I'm glad. I think that's the best decision for him. He cut weight way too much. Like, it was just, he weighed way too much. So it was just like death staring him at the door every single time that he had to step in and fight these last few years. As we get older, we get more, we just have more mass. So good on him for moving up to welterweight. He's fighting D-Rod. D-Rod was a last minute replacement for him. He was supposed to fight Sean Brady when Conor McGregor fought against Dustin Poirier, but Sean Brady ended up, or I think Kevin Lee had an injury, but then Sean Brady, pulled out of this one because I think he had COVID or something like that. But nevertheless, he has Daniel Rodriguez fighting against him. It's going to be a really good fight. We'll see. Kevin Lee believes that he's already a top 5 welterweight to challenge Kamaru Usman. He thinks he has the answers. Get through D-Rod first. D-Rod's not even ranked, so you should be dominant in that fight. Another fight, Andre Petroski versus Michael Gilmore. That's just a feeder fight for Andre because Andre was on The Ultimate Fighter 2. They thought he was going to win, and he ended up losing. And so I think they just still want him to win and get into the UFC. So they gave him Michael Gilmore. He was also on The Ultimate Fighter. He was a replacement for somebody who got injured, and he got his ass whooped pretty quick. So I think they're giving Michael Gilmore this shot against Andre so Andre can beat his ass really quick and then get the UFC contract. And then Michael Gilmore probably won't, but since he came in at clutch for Dana White, he's giving him this opportunity, and I'm sure he's giving him some good money for that. Gerald Meerschaert versus Mahmoud Muradov for the middleweight opener of that main card. And then the preliminary card, I won't go into detail, but Sam Alvey is still fighting 33-15. He just does not quit. I do think that he's going to get cut from the UFC if he loses this. He's lost way too many recently, and so has Wellington Turman. So that's a fight that you guys should watch because the loser is definitely getting cut. So all right, so that is looking ahead at UFC Fight Night Vegas. A couple other things that I want to talk about before I let you guys go. Thanks for staying with me so far. We got a couple little things to talk about. I'm not sure if Luis is gonna do his episode to fill this gap. Again, we apologize. I'm going to put this out there pretty quick here. But I do want to mention, we did do a little poll on how did you get into the UFC or who's your favorite fighter. And so I want to mention a couple people, the people that I have. So I hope that Luis can, and maybe we'll do it next week as well. We'll run this back so we can get more people involved because I know for a fact that when we originally recorded, we had about 5 or 6 people that we wanted to shout out. A couple of Luis's friends, Jack Durham. I apologize, Jack, if you're hearing this. I'm going to get you on the next episode with your favorite fighter and your favorite UFC events. I believe Michael Bisping was number 3 on your list, but you had a couple in there. So, nevertheless, let's get to it. All right. I'll start with, I won't start with myself because I'm going to go off on a tangent whenever I talk about my favorite fighter and my favorite UFC event. But George Sanchez, my brother, shout out to my brother for being a huge supporter, always has been. His favorite fighter, Randy the Natural Couture. Of course, I believe that's my dad's favorite fighter too. But my brother said he was the most dominant of his time, both heavyweight and light heavyweight. He personally liked him because he was the old man on the block, putting a whooping on those young bulls. And I agree 100%. He could not only throw the good hands, the cool, he had those hands for everybody, but he was also a really great wrestler. And that was his bread and butter, actually, was wrestling. And, he could throw down with the best of them, and, we can go on and on about Randy Couture, but, my brother said that UFC 15 was the first time he got into the UFC. I was about 3 years old. My brother was 9. Randy whooped Vitor Belfort. All around great fight. I don't remember that card, but I believe it. Another great fight was UFC 44. I do remember this card. Randy put a spanking, as my brother says, on a young Tito Ortiz. So, plenty of cut of mine for my brother, but those are his two. And I will speak on that. I remember UFC 44. That was one of my first memories as well with the UFC. Randy definitely put a spanking on young Tito Ortiz, quite literally. He had him, I think he had him mounted. They're on the ground. Tito Ortiz didn't really have a good defense, takedown defense. So they got to the ground. Randy was beating him up down there, took his back, ended up riding him kind of like a cowboy on a horse, and was spanking him. And that shit's embarrassing. And that's how come I remember it, because, these guys are warriors, and usually you don't take the other warrior lightly. But when you're spanking them in front of everybody to see, you know that you got that shit in the bag. So shout out to my brother for that. Yes, those were great events, and that was pretty cool. I like taking it back. Those old school events, man, they're crazy. I really enjoy that. Um, Moving on, I do have pulled up here one of Luis's friends, Giovanni De Leon. Shout out to you. I hope I didn't butcher that. You said that it's too hard to pick just one, but Max Holloway is definitely up there for you. Sir, I agree. Max Holloway is up there for me. Right now, he's one of my current favorite fighters for sure. That man put on a clinic against Calvin Kattar earlier this year. I think that was the first fight card this year, 2021, in January. And man, you know what? I think they said this during the fight, but Max Holloway reminded everyone that night of Muhammad Ali. He was, just messing around with Calvin Kattar. He was, going back and forth, head movement crazy. He was letting him, sound off on. Well, he was letting Calvin Kattar attempt to sound off on him, but he was just the head movement was too great. He was going back and forth, left, right. You can't touch me. I'm the greatest boxer in the MMA. Nobody can touch me. And then he pieced him up after he said that. Kept piecing him up. It was really brutal. It was one of the best fights of Max Holloway's career, in my opinion. And I believe that there's so many fights these days they get lost in the shuffle there. But that one right there, if I can remember, I can make a great argument for that actually being one of the greatest fights in the UFC. That was amazing. Now you said your first MMA event, Giovanni. You said Clay Guida versus Diego Sanchez will be forever in your top favorite fights, and that's what got you hooked. If that doesn't get anybody hooked, I don't know what will. That was a great fight, Clay Guida versus Diego Sanchez. Oh my God, that was a great. Diego Sanchez, the Nightmare, Clay Guida. These guys are full of energy. If you want to look at a fight and see how the old school UFC was, because remember, guys, this is a really young sport still. But if you look at those two guys, they show you what prime old school UFC fighters did. Man, they just went to war. They swung for the fences on each other. They welcomed it. They looked at each other, said, "Bring it on," and then just started swinging. That was a great fight. Those guys, honestly, you could pick, 1 in 3 Clay Guida fights are absolutely legendary. One in 3 for Diego as well. I would say one. I was gonna say 1 and 2 if he would have retired 5 years ago, but he didn't. So now it's 1 in 3. Those guys are monsters, and they bleed a lot. So everyone likes that in the UFC. If you're a fan, you probably like that. So moving on, I will go ahead because I don't remember anyone else's off the top, but we will circle back. I promise you guys. Jack, I unfortunately don't remember yours. I know I had a lot to do with the UK, but we will definitely circle back because I know that there's just some great fights to talk about for sure. And we're going to probably ask that question again. But I will end this little segment on who my favorite fighter of all time and a UFC event that I remember, or that the one that got me hooked, we should say, right? And so my favorite fighter of all time is hands down Georges St. Pierre, GSP, the man from Montreal. He has done so much for the sport. He was the evolution of the UFC. So I think every 5 to 10 years, pick somewhere in between there is somebody who comes and you're just like, oh wow, this is the next evolution of UFC. Georges St. Pierre was that man. Georges St. Pierre never said no to a fight. He always wanted to prove himself. Some people make the argument that he's not the GOAT, which I will challenge anybody any day against that sentiment because I know that he's a GOAT for a lot of reasons, and I can just start naming them off. I can have arguments against your GOAT, whoever you think that is, and good ones at that. I will bring the facts, but Georges St. Pierre, man, he just dominated the field. I believe he has one of the longest streaks of defending his title of all time. The man retired while holding on to the title. He was tired. He said, it's been like 8 years. I don't know how long, but it's been like, 8 title defenses for sure. 8 title defenses, and I'm just tired of this. Being the champion that long. You have to fight or they'll strip the belt. So he's like, you know what, 8. I guess I'm good. And then he comes back. He retired. Comes back years later. Goes up a weight class. And then takes that title as well. This man is the greatest of all time. Anytime he's ever lost, he's ran it back with that person and taken the W. So every loss he has taken, he got the dub back. So that's my favorite fighter of all time. Uh, you know, if we talk about my favorite fight of George St. Pierre of all time, there's too many to choose. I can't do it. I will say, watching him come back, going against Michael Bisping, was legendary because he was gone for like what 3-4 years. When you're gone that long, you don't think that man's going to come back. He comes back and takes the title from him. So, George St. Pierre, you are the GOAT. Moving on, the first UFC event that I remember was Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz, the very first time. The very first, how should I say this? The first time they fought against each other. I believe they fought against each other like 3 times now, but that was my first one that I remember, mainly because, I remember a lot of fights before that. But the thing is, I didn't really care about the storyline. The storyline didn't really matter to me until that fight. The storyline is what got me hooked into the UFC. This fight, Tito Ortiz was the champion. He held it for a little bit. The only person that seemed that was going to take it from him was his best friend in Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell didn't want to fight Tito Ortiz. They were friends, man. But then, you want to hold the crown, you got to take it from the person's head. And that was his best friend. And he ended up doing it. And I was going for Chuck. And, I think Tito Ortiz didn't really want Chuck Liddell he didn't think that his friend was going to take it. But, money talks, Dana White, UFC, I'm sure they stirred the pot a little bit. But that was just a great storyline. And that was a great fight. And Chuck Liddell is a beast. That boy is a monster, the Iceman. So I don't really remember the rest of that card. Actually, fun fact, there is one fight in that card that I do remember, and that is the fact that has to do with something recent, and that was Robbie Lawler versus Nick Diaz, where that was the first time that they fought, and they're running it back this September. And that's 17 years. Imagine waiting 17 years to fight somebody and to get that W back, or just to get the rematch. That's insane. These guys are still fighting 17 years later. I can't believe it. So you guys tune in. That's in September. That's the undercard for Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega. And just tune in, guys. That's going to be a great fight to watch. And that's how I got into the UFC. Now you guys know my favorite fighter. Please, if you guys think otherwise, I will have you on the show. Or you can just send in your argument for who the greatest of all time is, and then I'll pick that apart because it has to be GFC. It has to be GSP, and I will convince everybody as long as I have this podcast. Now, at the same time, I am willing to concede and say that since there are so many different weight classes, that you cannot just have one GOAT. But if you had to choose, it has to be GSP. Don't get me started on Khabib. I like Khabib. He's one of the most dominant of all time, but he cannot be considered the GOAT. We will get into that in a later episode. A couple things that I want to touch on really quick before I let you guys go. Fighter pay is ridiculous in terms of these fighters don't get paid. A lot of them are broke. Jared Cannonier is number 3. He's basically number 3 in the world in the MMA rank. Not even the UFC, in the MMA rankings globally. He's number 3 in the world. And this man asked for another fight as soon as possible because he's broke. He clarified on Ariel Helwani's podcast that he, is good off of this fight for a little bit, but he's basically living fight to fight. He's not living paycheck to paycheck, right? He's living fight to fight. And if he fights twice a year, he's good, but he wants to build something to let his, family not have to worry and make his mom retire and these things. If you are and I understand people have problems with athletes getting paid a lot, but you also got to look at it like this. These athletes are not getting paid what they're worth. The companies are making so much money. So you have to give it to these athletes who are the ones that are making people watch and people are paying good money, not for Dana White to talk. They're paying good money for these fighters to fight. And yeah, they build the storylines, the UFC and all these other promotions, but you have to, and these other promotions are doing a great job. From the sound of it, it sounds like all these promotions are paying their athletes pretty well, except the UFC. UFC is the creme de la crop, or whatever, creme de la creme, the cream of the crop of MMA promotions. And these fighters deserve to get paid well. If you're number 3 in the world, you shouldn't have to wait fight to fight for that money to be okay. That's all I got to say about that for now. We will tackle this as often as we can because it's an important subject, and I hope that people, tweet about it, keep the pressure on the UFC. I think if enough people do, eventually something can change. Unfortunately, I don't really see that happening anytime soon, but we will revisit this topic at a later date. And on that note, I have nothing left to say to you guys, at least for right now. Matter of fact, I do have a lot to say, but I'm not going to. I'm going to wait. We're going to wait for the next week. I apologize again for the lack of um, getting that prepared, that podcast that we had between Luis and I. There's just a lot of connection issues. We're hoping to get that all fixed up and ready to go, get the videos back up. We're still figuring this thing out, but we absolutely love talking about MMA. We really appreciate you guys, our fans, our friends, our supporters. I ain't even going to say fans because we're not quite there yet, but we do love doing this. And so this is not going to stop. We're going full throttle as long as we possibly can. And on that note, this is Los MMA Hermanos podcast, and I will see you guys later.